It's great to have the pastor that we have. It was great to see him so excited to go on his holidays. It was like a kid going off to summer holidays. And he does work very hard. But he loves that. Sometimes as deacons we try to talk him out of it, and that's just the way he wants to do it. So, in my opinion, we just let him go. Wind him up and let him go. He's been, I'm hoping I'm going to stop being so nervous pretty soon, but he's been speaking about people and their testimonies. He did some of the present day ministers and different people. I haven't been in all the classes because I was teaching Sunday school some. But for a long while, a while ago, I tried, it was an idea I had to try to follow through Peter's life and Peter's experience and the way that he, how things changed for him. I was one morning sitting at my table thinking, an old fisherman from 2,000 years ago, and I still know his name. And this got to leave me soon. And know his name, and he's famous. He's I know it was never his goal to be famous, and his life didn't show great fame, but he's well known, and he's done so much for the Lord. And I just wanted to look at a little bit. I've watched a lot. They found a boat just lately. If you go on YouTube, and maybe you can get lots of foolishness on YouTube, but I seem to find some things I like. And buried in the sand in the Sea of Galilee, if you just go on the Sea of Galilee and watch Sea of Miracles, they call it, they found the keel of a wooden boat from probably 2,000 years ago, and the way it was buried, it never decayed. Oxygen couldn't get to it, and it never decayed. And it caused quite a buzz. They found that in 1986, and they built lots of wooden boats similar. They don't have a lot of that. It's just the bottom of the boat. But it was. I don't get too excited about these finds. It doesn't change the Bible one way or the other, but it's kind of neat to imagine. And now they've built boats like that you can go on a tour and you can go out on the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. It's not a sea, it's a lake. And it's the lowest lake, I believe, in the world. And it's a very, and that's where the Lord chose to begin his ministry. And I like to imagine that Peter was just a small boy in Galilee. I don't know what Galilee would be like, but playing by the shore. Maybe he had a father or an uncle was a fisherman, and he dreamed of being a fisherman. He was always, I believe, he was always a leader. You know, you always have these friends that can kind of get the crowd together. If you want to have a ball game, there's always this guy. I can remember people when I was young. I won't say who they were, but they could always get a crowd together. They could say, this lad's coming, and maybe they didn't even know that yet, but then, you know, they could get something going and get a crowd together. They were leaders in their own way, though they were just children. And I think Peter's always been a leader. And I think he was misjudged when he's called a coward. I don't think he was ever scared. But I do think there was something else wrong. And I'll get to that later. I really enjoy this. If I can say it the way I believe it, it'll be a good lesson. Peter, and he had a brother named Andrew, who's far more quiet. But Andrew's famous for one thing and one thing only. Andrew brought people to Jesus. The little boy with his lunch, Andrew brought him. There was a bunch of Greek people there one time that wanted to see Jesus. It was Andrew that brought them. And it's Andrew that brings Peter to Jesus. So Peter was originally, Simon Peter and Andrew were fishermen from Bethsaida on the Sea of Galilee. Andrew, who was a disciple of John the Baptist, began to follow Jesus on the day John announced him, so at his baptism. I tried to find all over I try to figure out things that, I remember Weaver saying, sometimes we try to get everything in order, and we just can't. And I couldn't. But I've tried to find proof of who was at Jesus' baptisms, but there's no real proof given. But it's very possible that John was there. And can you imagine going to a baptism? We all love to go to baptisms. We've had them at Miramichi Bible Camp just lately in the river there. And years ago, we used to have them back home in the river. They had them up the Little Southwest in the river. And but can you imagine going to a baptism and the Lord being baptized and the Spirit descending like a dove? Like, that's getting more than you bargained for sure. So it's possible that John was there at that baptism. I don't think Peter was. It's possible that John was. But then Jesus, of course, disappeared for at least 40 days. I don't know, maybe a little longer, probably a little longer. But he went into the wilderness to be tempted. And he was gone for a while. But in that time, John, I believe, gets put in prison. And Jesus returns to the Sea of Galilee, to that area. So let's just read a little bit in Matthew chapter 4. I'm going to skip through Matthew. I got up early this morning saying the last time I tried to do this, I was unorganized. So I'm going to get organized. And I realized about a half hour or an hour into it that I will never be organized. So I just do what you do. Now when Matthew 4 verse 12, we'll start and we'll just read a little bit. Now when Jesus had heard that John was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast in the border of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, in the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentile, the people that sat in darkness saw great light, and to them which sat in the region in the shadow of death is sprung up. From that time Jesus began to preach and to say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So Jesus came along I should read a little farther. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting the net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. So there's different accounts, and they're all the same account, but it's saw differently in some of the other Gospels, but there's no way I can start to get into that or I'll get all confused. But it is nice to read it in all the Gospels. It's the same thing, but it's every writer saw it differently. Not differently, but from a different point of view. And so the first time Jesus met Peter, he knew his name, and he had a name for him from God. He said, thou art Simon Peter, and thou shalt be called Peter, the rock. So anyways, that's their meeting, and Peter starts to follow Jesus. But before that, even before that, John the Baptist had started a whole new doctrine. And the system of that day wasn't a bad system, I don't believe. It was the system that God had put in place. It was more of the Old Testament system with the high priest, and I don't know that much about it, but man had brought in many, many rules, maybe 600 or something. I don't know. I've heard people say, but I don't know. But all these different rules and regulations, and pride had crept into the church of that day. And the system of that day, based on the law, many rules added, very hard system. We don't see any forgiveness in the system of that day. I don't, anyways. The poor were sinners that caused their own pain. Probably the meek were weak and had no place in the system. The sick were unclean I see no place where the religious system ever healed anyone. So, like I say, the system wasn't bad. It was to show people God, but it had become flawed. And every system does. If you let pride into your belief system, even your own personal belief system, if you let pride rule it, it will become flawed. It will become, for lack of a better word, though you realize I'm not a preacher, so I don't mind using words I shouldn't, it'll just become stupid. If you let pride rule it, if you think you're better than others, and so the system that Peter and Andrew grew up in, they were looking for a Messiah. Did you notice that? I think it's in another gospel, that when Andrew told Peter, "We have found him. We have found the Messiah." So they were looking for a Messiah. They knew, like I said, the system had good in it. It had truth in it, but it had become clouded with all these rules and regulations, and we have to be careful of that in every system. So Jesus started this whole new gospel. John started it first. This whole new, where all the sinners were welcome. Come and repent. There was nobody turned away. Todd read today about the miracle of the woman touching Jesus' garment. If she'd have done that to one of those high priests, and her a sickly woman, she would have been in so much trouble that probably wouldn't have been seen no more. But it was so different with Jesus. Everything was so different. And it must have been a shock to the system. And what I'm trying to do is think of that in the eyes of this fisherman as he starts to follow Jesus. And he had spent most of his life from that point before that on just on the water, fishing and working, and he had his little crew. It kind of reminds me of myself. I know it seems a bit arrogant to compare yourself to Peter in the Bible, but in certain ways, he just had his little group of men that he looked after, and I think I want to get at that point too. He looked after his men. I believe he was famous for that, and that's why they followed him so easily. I think if you fell out of the boat, Peter'd make sure he got you back in. And he was that type of man, I think. I know I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but it seems to be that he was a good, solid man. He was a big man, I think, heavy. When John and him ran to the tomb, John outran him. John wouldn't go in. Peter just charged right in. He didn't stop for very much, but he didn't always make the right decisions neither, and we'll see that. So it was a whole different system, and it must have been really, the teaching was so different. And I was going to look at the Sermon on the Mount, but we'll just look at some of that. We'll just start in verse 3 and look at it. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then just skipping through it. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness. All these things wouldn't have been blessed in the system that they grew up in. The elite of the day looked down on everybody around them. If they wouldn't have sinned and wasted their substance, they wouldn't be like that. So it was a whole different way of looking at things, and a whole new, the parable of the sower and the seed, and all these parables he gave. And I can't look at all these because I want to go on with this. So, but Todd was speaking of the miracles, and then I just wanted to look at this quick. I don't know how I'm off for time, but I'm sure I'll have lots. The wonder of it all. Now, just think, you're just a normal working man. You're just a fisherman. You probably did some things for the people around you. You know, you're good to your family, good to the people that work with you, but nothing big ever happened in Bethsaida, I don't think. It wasn't a place where great events happened. It doesn't seem. It was a quiet area, and you know, Jesus taught great things. And the one thing that they mention quite often, I'm not reading very much scripture, but in Matthew 7:28, I think it is. We're just skipping through Matthew, and we're skipping through fast. Maybe you can tell me some of your favorite miracles when we get along here some. Matthew 7:28. What have I got there? And it came to pass when Jesus had ended these saying that the people were astonished at his doctrine. So as Jesus taught, it was different. You know, when you hear a good preacher, it's a good time to mention that, because you have one that's not so good here and now. But there's certain preachers that they just have an authority about them, and not an authority in that they're trying to rule over you, but you can tell they know what they're talking about, and they're very, very good. Our pastors like that, Weavers like that. There's lots. We hear lots of good speakers here, and they have, we could almost say, a mastery of the Word of God. They understand it. They love it. It's what they do. It's what they were born to do. And they sense that in Jesus. It was about him. He wrote it. So, like, if the author of the book comes and explains the book to you, he's going to have a pretty good mastery of that book. He wrote it. So they could sense that in him. And that was so different from the world that they had grown up in. And then the theme of healing. He heals a leper. He heals a centurion's servant. But let's just look for a minute in Matthew chapter 8, verse 14. This is my favorite of them all. And when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife mother laying and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto them. Now listen to this. When the evening was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sickness. So just notice who they were. Many that were possessed with devils, that had spirits were broken, the broken people. And in Peter's own house, his mother-in-law's house, we assume Peter's wife must have died, because she's never ever mentioned, but he had a mother-in-law, so he was married sometime. But she's never ever mentioned in the Bible. But so in his own house, can you imagine, as the sun set, I just got thinking about that. I don't seem like I can paint the picture I want to paint right now. But as the sun set on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, his house now is, they built 5 different, I don't know who ever allowed, you hear these rules where you're not allowed to build something on certain sites and stuff. They're good rules, because they built 5 different things on the top of Peter's house. Now, they know where it is, and now there's a big thing over it with a glass floor that you can look down and look at Peter's house. But it would have been so cool if they'd just left it alone, but man can't do that. But in his own house, as the sun set that evening, the broken people came and were healed. And God, you see that, like it was said in Isaiah, he was I hear the words in a song I've heard, the pain taker. He took their pain, he bore their sorrow, and he healed their broken spirit. And just imagine what Peter felt like when all this was over and quieted down, and he sat to ponder the day a little bit. From a day of fishing and working on the water to a day of seeing the broken healed. What a change in a man's life. It's hard to wrap your head around that he could have this big a change in his life. And when you let Jesus into your life, there is a great change in your life. And it seems like there's so much I didn't cover, and I'm skipping through so bad, but I wanted to get a little bit to this. Peter, by this time, has become a great friend of Jesus. He has He has seen miracles. He has felt the authority. They're great friends. But when you get to Matthew 16, and okay, let me get to Matthew 16 and find out what I'm doing before I start reading. Matthew 16. Okay, let's start at verse 15 and read a little bit. And Jesus is asking them who they say he is. Some said he was Elias, some said he was the prophet. And he said unto them, But whom say ye that I am? In verse 15. And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I mentioned that the last time I spoke about another man. That if you know that today, if you know that in your heart, that Jesus is the Son of God, that was revealed to you. You didn't figure that out from anything. That was revealed to you by God, and you know that by God. But then, in verse 21 of the same chapter, verse 21 of the same chapter, something changes. So to this point, Simon and Jesus are friends. They've worked together. Peter looks up to Jesus as a rabbi, as a leader, and everything is great to this point. But in verse 21, you read this, From this time forth began Jesus to show on his disciples how that he must go on to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and be raised again the third day. So there's a whole new doctrine coming in here now. Jesus tells him he's got to die. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, for this shall not be unto thee. And in my mind, it's like Peter saying, I look after my people. That's not going to happen to you. And Peter has been so long with them, and he's such a friend of his, but he has no idea what the plan of God is. He doesn't know that he's going completely against God. And I don't think this gets fixed for a little while. I really don't. Because this goes on again a little later. There's a bunch of miracles again through Matthew. I won't try to find it now. And Jesus gets telling them again that he must needs suffer and die. And you know what happens that time? They're all in an argument and a fight. Maybe not a fight. You wouldn't call it a fight. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of tension. Who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? And even the mothers get involved. And one of the mothers goes to Jesus, and my son's going to be the greatest in the kingdom. Like, isn't that such a... And I'm not... These disciples are better men than me, better men than us. And that's what they got into. So we got to watch these kind of things. And most of them were fishermen. Like, why would they think that they should be great? You know, you didn't come from greatness. You got no royalty in you. Why? But they just seen they were part of this system, this thing, and they looked for greatness. We sang in the cantata a while ago. I'm not going to sing. I didn't get my music out. But there was a line in one of the cantata songs. I don't even know which song it was. But compelled to chase the crimson thread. And after that, I went home and I wrote some stuff down. I was reading this stuff at that time, and I wrote some stuff down. And Matthew 16:24, I'm already probably read that because I'm on a different page now. Yeah, I did. Then after Peter and Jesus meet, when Peter knows and loves Jesus, but he knows nothing of the gospel, and he knowingly wants to change God's plan of the gospel. At this time, Jesus said, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. The Son of Man shall come in glory of his Father with his angels." This idea that Jesus, who they have now followed for about 2 years, I'm thinking, sometimes them dates and facts I could have wrong, now or more, who can heal the sick, power over devils, just a superpower in their eyes, these disciples. He just can do anything. I missed that, and I want to talk about it too. The storm, the way the Sea of Galilee is so low, and the mountains outside it, where on the hillsides outside of that are very high, and the storms will come in and they just drop, and they hit the sea. You can watch that, and it just, in very short time, it can turn violent, and it would sink a ship easily. And that's what, and you know, Peter saw, he would be no stranger to those storms. He spent his life on that lake, but he never saw a man before that could quiet a storm. And there were so many things so impressive that Jesus has done, but yet this idea that he's going to be killed was so hard for them to take. And must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. They hated this idea. He knew Jesus very well. He followed him and seen storms stop, healing, lessons, feeding of the 5,000. He knew Jesus was the Son of God, but he didn't know anything about the price he had to pay for sin. An attitude of mind upon which one's life and actions are based. We all have a way we want things to be done. We do. We all have our way we want things to be done. We must follow Jesus. He doesn't follow us. We follow him. Peter, like us all, found this a hard lesson to learn. So far, he has made himself known, and he is so great, so full of hope, kindness, wisdom, strong. What a friend Peter had in Jesus. He could even forgive sins. But the reason he came, the will of the Father, the price of man's sin, is a hard thing. It's a pride-breaking thing. And Peter struggled with that. And I believe we'll turn to Matthew 26:52. I really don't believe that got fixed for a long time. And that's why I'm saying I don't think Peter was ever scared when that maiden said to him at the crucifixion. Let's just try to not let myself get ahead of myself. Matthew 26:52. Okay, so this is in the garden. We all know the story. I think everybody here knows the story well. And they came to take Jesus. And Peter, who probably carried a little knife because of his occupation, I'm thinking. When you were a fisherman, I'm sure you always had your little sharp knife on you. Because if a net, they throw their nets. If you get tangled in a net, a knife would be a very important tool to have in your toolbox. That's what the government says now. They always have what they got in their toolbox. But anyways, so I think Peter would have this little knife with him. Then said Jesus, so he took out his knife and he was going to fight. It's what he knew. It's who he was. Then said Jesus unto him, put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? So Peter's tendency, I think, he never did want this to happen. He didn't see the need for this. And he wanted to help. And Jesus said, put that away. And he healed that man. And I believe, and I could be wrong, and I probably am, and maybe he'll straighten me out when I get to heaven. But I believe more than cowardly, more than scared, he was angry. Because that's not the way he wanted this to happen. And he was still angry with God for not taking his help. He wouldn't let him help. And Peter was a man, a protector of his friends. I don't think he was afraid. I think he was angry with his friend who would not. I just said all that. But I do that all the time. I say what I wrote down, then I read it. But Peter didn't see the need of all this. But there was a need, wasn't there? And do we see the need of it? And but the pastor mentioned last week, and he read some from Peter's book, because Peter wrote a book, of course, way near the end of our Bible. And I'm not finding it fast, which I would like to. There it is. It's just a small book. Oh, I got something in there, so I would find it. That's why I couldn't find my pen. And Peter wrote these words and many others, and I can't cover his book. I can't hardly cover anything. But Peter wrote these words, "But with the precious blood of Christ, as a lamb without blemish and without spot, who verily was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifested in these last times for you, who by him do believe in God that raised him up from the dead and gave him glory, that your faith and hope might be in God." So there's a lot went on through the book of Acts, but Peter finally realized that what he was trying to stop was very necessary. It was what Jesus came for. And sometimes I think we all think that we would like to be a friend of Jesus. And, the miracles are great. Everybody loves miracles. But there was another side to it. There was the price of sin. And without that, it would have been a sad situation. So I don't know even what I'm trying to say now, but it's just, I think Peter, even after spending a lifetime with Christ, or not a lifetime, but a few years through his ministry, he had so much more to learn, and we all have a lot more to learn. And I'll close in prayer. Father in heaven, I do thank you for your word. I thank you for the Savior. And just to imagine what it would have been like to be on earth with you and to serve with you and to see the great things you've done, the great healings, the great miracles, and just such a blessing. But Lord, to realize that you had to go to Calvary. These things were not accidents. They had to happen because we are sinners. And there was no other way you could go back to glory and take us with you one day unless you paid that awful price. So I just thank you that Peter understood that and preached a lot after that and just realized that had